1952. Larry Mann, first Cup driver death. In 1952, at Pennsylvania's notoriously perilous Langhorne Speedway, Larry Mann became the first driver to die during a NASCAR Cup Series race. Mann was piloting his green Hudson Hornet, a car he nicknamed the Green Hornet, when, on lap 211 of the 250-mile event, he lost control on the dirt oval's treacherous surface. The car smashed through a guardrail, flipped multiple times, and came to a rest against a tree outside the track. Mann succumbed to his injuries, massive head trauma, and a pulmonary hemorrhage shortly after. His tragic death, the first in NASCAR's top division, cast a somber spotlight on the dangers of early stock car racing and underscored the need for better safety measures even in the sport's infancy. 1953. Black Saturday. 2 drivers killed at Raleigh Speedway. On a humid night of September 19, 1953, NASCAR fans at Raleigh Speedway witnessed a nightmare. Shortly after the green flag waved for a 250-lap modified sportsman's race, driver Bill Blevins' car stalled on the backstretch. As cars swerved to avoid him, 18-year-old Jesse Midkiff barreled into Blevins' stopped vehicle at nearly 90 miles per hour. The impact ignited a massive fireball, sending flames 70 feet into the sky. Chaos engulfed the track as crews scrambled to douse the inferno. When the smoke cleared, both Blevins and Midkiff lay fatally injured in the twisted wreckage. Dozens of other cars were damaged in the 15-car pileup, though no other drivers were seriously hurt. Spectators and racers alike were horrified. The tragedy quickly earned the ominous moniker Black Saturday, symbolizing one of NASCAR's earliest dark days. In a grim decision that would be unthinkable today, officials eventually restarted the race after clearing the debris, and Buddy Schumann went on to claim a hollow victory. But the celebratory mood was extinguished. As drivers quietly loaded up to leave, NASCAR's young sanctioning body faced tough questions about safety. This was the first time multiple drivers had been killed in the same NASCAR event, and it shook the sport to its core. 1960. Pit crew tragedy at the Southern 500, Darlington. The 1960 Southern 500 is remembered as one of the deadliest races in NASCAR history. On lap 95 of the Labor Day Classic, leading driver Bobby Johns tangled with Roy Tyner coming off of turn 4. Their bumpers locked, and in a split second, both cars skidded out of control directly onto pit road, which at that time had no wall separating it from the racing surface. Johns' car careened into the crowded pit area at full speed. With a sickening crash, his Chevy demolished a wooden trackside observation stand and then plowed into a group of crew members servicing Joe Lee Johnson's car. The impact was devastating. Johnson's chief mechanic Paul McDuffie and crewman Charles Sweatland were struck and killed instantly, as was NASCAR official Joe Taylor, who had been standing by the pit wall. 3 other mechanics were badly injured, and even a spectator suffered wounds from flying debris. A stunned silence fell over the grandstands as rescue workers rushed in. Johns miraculously climbed from his wrecked car, but the damage was done. Incredibly, and in keeping with the era's norms, officials did not stop the race. Even as the victims were tended to, the remaining drivers raced on, unaware of the full scope of the disaster unfolding in the pits. Buck Baker eventually limped home as the winner, but victory felt trivial on this grim afternoon. 1961. Curtis Turner and the Union Ban. NASCAR's Labor War. In 1961, NASCAR was shaken by a rebellion that nearly tore the sport apart. Curtis Turner, nicknamed the Blonde Blizzard for his fearless driving, led an effort to unionize stock car racers under the Teamsters Federation of Professional Athletes. Drivers were frustrated by low prize money and the lack of medical coverage for injuries. Turner had found an ally in Teamsters boss Jimmy Hoffa, who offered financial support to bail out the struggling Charlotte Motor Speedway. On one condition: Turner had to organize a drivers' union. 2-time champion Tim Flock joined Turner's cause, but the idea of collective bargaining enraged NASCAR founder Bill France Sr. France had built the sport through strict control, and he saw unions as a mortal threat to his authority. His response was ruthless. By mid-1961, France banned both Turner and Flock for life, blacklisting 2 of NASCAR's biggest stars overnight. The move sent shockwaves through the garage. Even fan favorite Fireball Roberts, who initially showed support, quickly backed away after being briefly sidelined himself. France had made his stance clear. Any hint of union activity would be crushed. Turner, a race winner just weeks earlier, was suddenly exiled, forced to compete in outlaw events on dusty dirt tracks. Persona non grata at NASCAR speedways. 1963. Wendell Scott's overdue victory and racism in NASCAR. On a dusty Florida afternoon in 1963, Wendell Scott made history as the first black driver to win a race in NASCAR's top division. However, the triumph came with injustice. Scott, an independent from Virginia, drove the race of his life in the 200-lap feature at Jacksonville. In his blue number 34 Chevy, he lapped the field twice and was the clear winner. But in a shocking twist, officials declared Buck Baker the victor and guided him to victory lane. Scott was left on the sidelines, denied the spotlight. Allegedly, organizers were unwilling to see a black man celebrated on stage, where tradition included kissing a white trophy queen in front of a segregated Southern crowd. The decision cut deep, leaving Scott and his team devastated. Hours later, after the crowd had gone home, NASCAR quietly admitted a scoring error and amended the results, naming Scott the winner by 2 laps. He got the prize money, but no trophy, robbed of the immediate celebration that every driver dreams of. His grandson would later call it one of the greatest atrocities in sports history. For years, Scott's only Cup victory carried no trophy, no fanfare, just another reminder of the racism he fought every time that he raced. He often faced taunting, was barred from certain track restaurants and hotels, and even survived death threats. Despite all of this, Scott persevered on shoestring budgets, logging 20 top 5 finishes over 13 seasons. 1964. Joe Weatherly's fatal crash at Riverside. Just weeks into the 1964 season, tragedy struck NASCAR with the loss of Joe Weatherly, one of its reigning champions. Little Joe Weatherly was as jovial off-track as he was fearless behind the wheel. A 2-time defending Cup Series champion riding a wave of success. But during the Motor Trend 500 at Riverside, his number 8 Mercury sailed off course in Turn 6. In an era before window nets or full harnesses, the 41-year-old's head whipped outside the driver's window as the car smashed into a concrete wall. The impact was fatal. Weatherly died instantly from massive head injuries. Shock rippled through the garage. The sport's colorful clown prince of racing was gone. Grim details emerged. Weatherly hadn't been wearing a shoulder harness and, like most drivers back then, had no window net. Ironically, he'd been wary of those very safety devices, fearing he'd be trapped in a fire. Those choices proved fateful. His death marked the first time a sitting NASCAR champion was killed during a season, casting a heavy pall over 1964. Drivers pressed on with heavy hearts, while close friend Richard Petty openly mourned. Fans were forced to confront a sobering truth. Even the sport's brightest stars weren't immune to its dangers. 1964. Fireball Roberts' fiery end spurs safety reforms. Glenn Fireball Roberts was a superstar of NASCAR's earlier years, charismatic, fast, and immensely popular. Tragically, his final moments came in an inferno that would change the sport forever. During the World 600 at Charlotte, on lap 7, Roberts' Ford swerved while avoiding a wreck between Ned Jarrett and Junior Johnson. His car spun backwards into the inside wall, flipped, and immediately burst into flames. The sight was horrifying. A ball of fire consuming the overturned car. Jarrett stopped his own car and sprinted to the wreck. From inside, he heard Roberts scream, "Ned, help me!" By the time Jarrett and safety crews pulled him out, Roberts had suffered third-degree burns over more than 80% of his body. He was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, clinging to life. For weeks, the racing world held its breath. Roberts, just 35, and the 1962 Daytona 500 champion, fought bravely in a Charlotte ICU. At first, there was hope, but on June 30th, he took a grave turn, developing pneumonia and sepsis from his injuries. On July 2nd, 1964, Glenn Fireball Roberts succumbed. NASCAR had lost one of its brightest stars, and the garage was left in heartbreak and shock. 1965. The Hemi boycott and Petty's drag racing tragedy. In 1965, NASCAR was rocked by an off-track power struggle centered on the fearsome 426 Hemi engine, Chrysler's monster that had dominated the 1964 season. Concerned about a looming arms race in technology, NASCAR President Bill France Sr. declared the Hemi ineligible, arguing that it wasn't widely available in production cars. Chrysler's response was immediate. They pulled out of NASCAR entirely, cutting factory support and sidelining their biggest stars. That included reigning Daytona 500 champion Richard Petty, just 27 and at the height of his prime. Left without a ride, Petty made a surprising pivot to drag racing. He campaigned a supercharged Plymouth Barracuda nicknamed Outlawed, a pointed jab at NASCAR's Hemi ban. But the move soon turned tragic. On February 28, 1965, at a drag strip in Dallas, Georgia, Petty's Barracuda suffered a stuck throttle or suspension failure. The car vaulted off the strip, over an embankment, and into a crowd of spectators. Dozens were injured. An 8-year-old boy, Wayne Dye, was killed instantly. Petty escaped with only minor injuries, but he was devastated. The boy's death reminded him of his own children, and the emotional weight was crushing. That day, Richard Petty walked away from drag racing for good. 1965. Billy Wade killed in Daytona tire test. Fresh off of winning 4 consecutive NASCAR races in July 1964, 34-year-old Billy Wade was conducting a routine tire test at Daytona in January 1965 when disaster struck. A tire blowout at high speed sent Wade's car hard into the wall in the track's west turn and inflicted fatal injuries. The reigning 1963 Rookie of the Year's sudden death, occurring outside of an actual race, hammered home that the danger didn't stop when the green flag did. In Wade's case, the tragedy prompted change. Goodyear soon developed an inner liner safety system to keep tires inflated during blowouts, a direct response aimed at preventing the kind of catastrophic failure that killed Wade. His passing was a grim reminder that even test sessions at Daytona's high banks carried lethal risks, claiming a rising star who had only months before been in victory lane. 1969. Talladega 500 boycott. Drivers versus NASCAR. NASCAR's bold dream for the fastest track in the world imploded in 1969, triggering an unprecedented mutiny. The brand new Alabama International Motor Speedway, later known as Talladega, was set to host its first 500-mile showcase. But from the start, the track proved treacherous. In practice and tire tests, drivers suffered alarming blowouts at speeds topping 200 miles per hour. The rough asphalt and untested banking shredded rubber after only a handful of laps. Concerned for their safety, members of the Professional Drivers Association, led by Richard Petty, demanded NASCAR postpone the race until safer tires could be delivered. But NASCAR founder Bill France Sr. flatly refused. The standoff exploded during a heated drivers' meeting on race eve. France reportedly mocked the group as cowards, and tempers boiled so high that Leroy Yarborough punched France in the face. By Sunday, the stars were gone. Petty, Pearson, the Allisons, Yarborough, Wendell Scott, and nearly every major name packed up and left Talladega. Fans expecting a clash of giants instead watched chaos unfold. Desperate to keep the event alive, France cobbled together a field of minor league Grand American drivers and a handful of locals. Incredibly, Richard Brickhouse, one of the few Cup regulars who stayed, took the checkered flag in a bizarre race filled with underpowered cars and unfamiliar names. The fallout was swift. France retaliated by disbanding the PDA, crushing the drivers' union effort and cementing his iron grip over the sport. 1973. Larry Smith fatal Talladega crash. In the 1973 Talladega 500, 1972 Cup Rookie of the Year Larry Smith lost his life in a seemingly innocuous accident that jolted NASCAR. Just 14 laps into the race, Smith's number 92 blew a tire, and he lightly brushed the turn 1 wall. The impact appeared minor. Even broadcaster Ken Squire noted it didn't look that bad. And yet, Smith was pronounced dead moments later from massive head injuries, a basilar skull fracture, The shocking fatality underscored how the high-speed Talladega Oval could claim anyone, rookie or veteran, and it spurred questions about safety equipment and superspeedway dangers. Smith's helmet was intact, fueling debate over whether removed padding or an abnormally soft skull contributed to the tragedy. 1975. Tiny Lund's death at Talladega. Dwayne "Tiny" Lund, a popular giant of a man and 1963 Daytona 500 champion, met a heartbreaking end in 1975 during a race at Talladega, often noted by fans as an ARCA or Grand National event on the Cup weekend. On August 17, 1975, Lund was involved in a violent six-car crash in the Talladega 500 that proved fatal. His car made contact with another and was then T-boned at high speed. Rescuers had pulled Lund from the wreck, and he was reportedly still alive upon extraction. But he succumbed to massive chest and internal injuries within minutes at the infield hospital. Lund's death was a huge blow for the NASCAR community. He was a hero who had once saved a fellow driver from a fiery crash. His passing underscored the ever-present peril of racing on Talladega's high-banked high-speed oval. 1975. Pit road explosion kills Randy Owens at Talladega. The 1975 Winston 500 delivered tragedy not on the track, but in the pits, a chilling reminder of the dangers faced by crew members. Randy Owens was just 20 years old, a young pit crewman for his brother-in-law, Richard Petty. His job that day was to operate a 100-pound pressurized water tank, a tool that teams used to cool overheated engines during pit stops. On lap 140, Petty's Dodge came in with a front wheel bearing on fire. Owens leaned over the tank to activate it, and in an instant, disaster struck. The tank exploded without warning, the blast echoing throughout the speedway. Owens was thrown at least 15 feet into the air, the force crushing his chest and heart on impact. Crew members nearby were knocked to the ground as Petty's pit erupted in chaos. Despite frantic efforts, Owens died instantly. The race itself no longer mattered. Petty, who had climbed from his car only moments before the blast, was shaken and distraught. His team withdrew immediately, leaving behind points and prize money. "I had just gotten out. Then it happened," Petty later recalled, his voice trembling. In the garage, silence replaced the roar of engines. Randy Owens, the polite kid from Level Cross who had grown up around the Petty clan, was gone. He left behind a wife, 2 young children, and a grieving NASCAR family who mourned one of their own. 1976. DieGuard's mystery motor cheating scandal. Cheating has always been a part of NASCAR's lore, but rarely was it as brazen or as dramatic as at the 1976 Daytona 500. In qualifying for the sport's biggest race, 2 top teams got busted in an audacious scheme. Darrell Waltrip's DieGuard Racing Chevrolet and A.J. Foyt's car were found to have hidden nitrous oxide systems to boost their engines. By injecting the laughing gas into the intake, they would run faster laps than legal. NASCAR officials, suspicious when Waltrip and Foyt suddenly slowed in practice compared to qualifying, tore the cars apart and discovered the mystery Go Fast devices. Both drivers' qualifying times were disallowed, igniting a firestorm of controversy. Foyt furiously denied any wrongdoing, nearly coming to blows with NASCAR's president. But Waltrip eventually admitted the caper with a cheeky grin. "If you don't cheat, you look like an idiot. If you do it and get caught, you look like a dope," Waltrip quipped, placing himself in the latter category. The 1976 nitrous scandal was early proof of systematic rule-bending in NASCAR's garage, and it remains one of the sport's most legendary cheating tales. 1979. Daytona 500 fistfight on live TV. One of NASCAR's most infamous on-track incidents didn't involve a wreck so much as a rumble. In the 1979 Daytona 500, the very first NASCAR race broadcast live, flag to flag on national TV, a last-lap collision for the win between Cale Yarborough and Donnie Allison erupted into a fistfight in the infield. As millions of stunned viewers looked on, Yarborough and Allison began swinging helmets and punches, soon joined in by Donnie's brother Bobby Allison in the brawl. CBS announcer Ken Squire captured the moment with the now-famous call, "And there's a fight," his tone equal parts surprise and excitement. The spectacle of two drivers duking it out on the Daytona asphalt shocked America. But it also immensely boosted NASCAR's publicity. The Bad Day at Daytona brawl became a defining, if darkly comic moment in NASCAR lore. What could have been a disgrace was embraced by many as legendary theater. It put NASCAR on the map for new fans, albeit for an outrageous reason. 1983. The King caught cheating. Petty's illegal engine scandal. In the fall of 1983, NASCAR fans witnessed the unthinkable. Richard Petty, the sport's beloved icon, caught in a cheating scandal that shook stock car racing to its core. It all unfolded at the Miller High Life 500 in Charlotte, where Petty claimed what was then his 198th career victory. The win sent the crowd into a frenzy. Their hero was inching closer to the magic mark of 200, but the celebration quickly turned to controversy. During post-race inspection, officials found Petty's Pontiac carried a massive infraction, an oversized 381 cubic inch engine, far above NASCAR's 358 limit. To make matters worse, his crew had also mounted the wrong tires, a softer left-sided rubber placed on the right side for extra grip. The King had been caught breaking the rules on two fronts. NASCAR's response was swift. Petty was fined a record $35,000 and docked 104 championship points, one of the harshest penalties in series history. His crew chief and brother, Maurice Petty, bore the humiliation of building the illegal motor. Yet, in a controversial decision, officials allowed Richard to keep the victory. At the time, NASCAR didn't strip wins after inspection. The backlash was fierce. Rival teams and the media argued the win should have been erased. 1 week later, NASCAR changed its policy. From then on, major violations could mean disqualification. The scandal left a lasting scar. For fans, it was jarring to see their hero, the King, forever tied to what became known as King Richard's big engine. 1987. Bobby Allison's airborne crash at Talladega leads to change. A sunny spring afternoon at Talladega turned terrifying on lap 22 of the Winston 500, in a moment that forever changed NASCAR's outlook on speed. Veteran driver Bobby Allison was charging down the front stretch at over 200 miles per hour when debris sliced his rear tire. In an instant, his number 22 Buick snapped sideways and, like a nightmare, lifted off the ground. The car slammed into the catch fence, nearly vertical, spinning like a top, while shredding more than 100 feet of steel barrier in front of packed grandstands. Spectators screamed and ducked as debris sprayed into the crowd. Dozens were struck by flying car parts, yet, by sheer luck, no one was killed. Several fans were treated for minor injuries as the battered fence just barely held. Allison's car, mangled beyond recognition, came to rest back on the track in a shower of twisted metal. Silence gripped the speedway. Then, cheers of relief erupted when Bobby Allison climbed out, virtually uninjured. But the near disaster left NASCAR officials and team owners pale-faced. They had narrowly avoided catastrophe. Allison later admitted he felt his car trying to fly and held on for dear life. That same weekend, Bill Elliott's qualifying run topped 212 miles per hour. Combined with Allison's terrifying crash, it became the final straw. NASCAR's cars had simply grown too fast for its biggest tracks. 1987 to 1988. Tim Richmond's downfall. AIDS, secrecy, and suspension. Tim Richmond's story is one of brilliance, tragedy, and stigma. In the mid-1980s, he was NASCAR's flamboyant superstar, movie star handsome, brash, and blisteringly fast. In 1986, Richmond won 7 races and seemed destined for greatness. But the following year, rumors swirled when he abruptly withdrew from competition. Privately, Richmond had been diagnosed with AIDS, a dreaded little understood disease at the time. Fearing the stigma and uncertain of his future, he kept his condition hidden from NASCAR and even most friends. In the summer of 1987, he staged a brief triumphant comeback, winning 2 races. But by the fall, his health declined again, and he stepped away indefinitely, officially citing double pneumonia. Things turned worse in early 1988. NASCAR introduced a new drug testing policy and demanded Richmond take a test before the Daytona 500. The results came back positive for banned substances, reportedly trace amounts of amphetamines and opioids. NASCAR suspended him immediately. just days before the race. Richmond denied drug use, insisting his AIDS medication caused a false positive. He sued for defamation and breach of contract, igniting a bitter legal battle. As the fight played out, NASCAR's doctor described him as a very sick young man who shouldn't be racing. Richmond felt betrayed and scapegoated. He would never return to the track. On August 13, 1989, Tim Richmond died of AIDS complications at just 34 years old, alone at his Florida home. 1989. Grant Adcox's fatal crash overshadows a championship finale. The 1989 NASCAR Cup season finale at Atlanta was supposed to be a day of celebration. It was marred by a fatal wreck that reminded everyone of racing's cruel side. Grant Adcox, a 39-year-old independent driver from Tennessee, was a journeyman who had scraped together a ride for the Atlanta Journal 500. On lap 202, Adcox's Chevrolet blew a tire as it barreled into the high-speed turn 3. The car never slowed. It slammed nearly head-on into the concrete wall at full tilt, exploding in a shower of debris. The impact was so violent that rescue workers knew it was grave. Adcox suffered catastrophic internal injuries and was extricated in critical condition. Within hours, news came that Grant Adcox had died at a nearby hospital, despite every effort to save him. The timing could not have been worse. This was the very race where Rusty Wallace would edge Dale Earnhardt for the season championship. But Adcox's death cast a somber pall over what should have been a festival. Wallace celebrated his title. Many in the garage were quietly thinking of Grant. Adcox was not a household name. He'd never won a Cup race, but he was respected as a hard worker and beloved for his friendly demeanor. In fact, this was his second brush with tragedy. His father, team owner Herb Adcox, had died of a heart attack at the track a year earlier. Now, son Grant had lost his life at the very same venue. 1990. Atlanta Pit Road Catastrophe. Mike Rich's death spurs reforms. The 1990 season ender at Atlanta provided a tragic wake-up call about pit road safety. During a late race caution with just 30 laps to go, a routine pit stop turned deadly chaos. Mike Rich, a 32-year-old rear tire changer for Bill Elliott's Melling racing team, was kneeling next to Elliott's car, dutifully loosening lug nuts. Suddenly, behind him, Ricky Rudd barreled into the pits too fast and lost control. Rudd's Chevy locked its rear brakes, spun sideways, and slammed into Elliott's parked car at full tilt. The impact violently knocked Elliott's jackman and front tire changer off their feet, but unseen on TV at first was Mike Rich pinned underneath Rudd's car, crushed between two 3,500-pound stock cars. Crew members from multiple teams sprinted over, frantically lifting Rudd's car to pull Rich out. Pandemonium erupted in the pits. Longtime NASCAR physician Dr. Jerry Punch was on the scene and later described it as one of the most horrific injuries he'd witnessed on pit road. Rich had sustained massive trauma. He was rushed to the infield care center and then airlifted out. In the garage, Elliott's crew wept and Rudd sat on pit wall in shock. The race finished under a cloud as news spread that Rich died in surgery a few hours later due to cardiac arrest from his injuries. It was the first pit crew fatality in the Cup Series since the 1960s, and it shook everyone who works over the wall to their core. Ironically, Mike Rich had only gotten the job that year after the previous tire changer was injured in another pit accident. A cruel twist of fate. 1991. J.D. McDuffie's death at Watkins Glen prompts track changes. Veteran driver J.D. McDuffie was a beloved NASCAR underdog, a true independent who made more than 600 starts without a single win, yet earned lasting respect for his grit and perseverance. On August 11, 1991, in the Budweiser at the Glen, McDuffie's career and life came to a sudden and violent end on just the 5th lap. Charging into the high-speed Turn 5 loop at Watkins Glen, McDuffie's number 70 Pontiac suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure when a front wheel hub broke. Losing both braking and steering, his car shot straight off course at near top speed and slammed nose first into a tire barrier with devastating force. The impact flipped the car upside down, burying it in the barrier. Fellow driver Jimmy Means also crashed while trying to avoid him. But it was instantly clear McDuffie's situation was far worse. Rescuers rushed to the scene, but the 52-year-old was already gone, killed on impact from massive head and neck injuries. The race was red-flagged as officials carefully extracted his body from the mangled blue Pontiac. In the garage, drivers and crews stood in stunned silence. McDuffie had been a fixture in the garage for decades, admired for running a shoestring team with a friendly smile. His death, NASCAR's first fatality in nearly 3 years, resonated deeply. It was especially haunting because just weeks earlier, sports car driver Tommy Kendall had survived a similarly terrifying crash in the same corner. Watkins Glen officials quickly realized changes had to be made. 1993. Alan Kulwicki, champion killed in a plane crash. Only months after celebrating his long-sought championship, NASCAR's reigning Cup title holder, Alan Kulwicki, was lost in a heartbreaking off-track tragedy. On a foggy Thursday evening in April 1993, Kulwicki boarded a private Merlin twin-prop plane bound for Bristol Motor Speedway. At 38, he was the sport's Cinderella story, a college-educated underdog who had defied the odds to win the 1992 championship through sheer grit and determination. Around 9 p.m. on April 1st, the unthinkable happened. Kulwicki's plane never made it to Tri-Cities Regional Airport. It crashed into a hillside just short of the runway, killing all 4 on board. Among the dead were Kulwicki, his close friend, and pilot Charlie Campbell, as well as 2 Hooters executives who were traveling with them. The news hit NASCAR like a thunderclap. Their defending champion was gone, not in a crash on the track, but in an instant in the darkness of rural Tennessee. By race morning at Bristol, the garage was in shock. The Speedway honored him with a moving gesture. Crews performed Kulwicki's trademark, the Polish victory lap, the reverse direction cooldown lap he had popularized. Rusty Wallace went on to win the race, then carried a Kulwicki flag on his own lap of honor, tears in his eyes. Investigators later determined the likely cause. The pilot had failed to activate the de-icing system, and ice buildup caused both engines to lose power. The finding only deepened the pain. Such a preventable mistake had claimed such a precious life. Fans, family, and his team were left devastated, turning his race shop into a memorial filled with flowers, flags, and notes of remembrance. 1993. Davey Allison's helicopter crash. A star gone too soon. The summer of 1993 brought NASCAR another devastating tragedy with the loss of Davey Allison, a 32-year-old superstar and heir to a legendary racing family. On July 12th, Davey flew his newly purchased Hughes 500 helicopter to Talladega Superspeedway to watch a friend test a Busch Series car. Though licensed, he had only a month of experience flying this particular helicopter. Attempting to land in an infield parking lot, his approach went wrong. Allison tried to make a sharp turn to line up, but instead placed the helicopter into an uncontrollable hover. The chopper suddenly shot upward about 25 feet before plunging nose first into the ground, rolling violently onto its left side. On impact, Davey's head slammed against the cabin with brutal force. Rescue crews reached the scene within moments. His longtime rival and close friend, Red Farmer, riding with him, miraculously survived with broken ribs and a collarbone. Davey, however, suffered catastrophic injuries, a fractured skull, and massive internal trauma. He never regained consciousness and was airlifted to Birmingham. The following morning, July 13th, 1993, Davey Allison died in the hospital. NASCAR was left in shock. Allison had been the sport's golden boy, the son of Hall of Famer Bobby Allison, winner of the 1992 Daytona 500, and fresh off a victory at Richmond weeks earlier. His charisma and fearless driving had made him a fan favorite. Grief swept through the garage. Bobby Allison himself, recovering from a career-ending crash in 1988, now had to bury his son. Davey's funeral in Hewtown, Alabama, drew the entire NASCAR family. Drivers wore black ribbons, and teams carried memorial decals for months in his honor. 1993 to 1994, restrictor plate chaos, and the big one. The early 1990s brought a growing dread over NASCAR's restrictor plate races at Daytona and Talladega. After Bobby Allison's near-catastrophic 1987 crash, which tore down fencing and led to restrictor plates capping speeds, drivers and fans hoped pack racing would be safer. Instead, the next few seasons saw frequent multi-car wrecks so massive they earned a nickname, the Big One. In 1993, crashes sent cars like Rusty Wallace's flipping end over end. In 1994, veteran Neil Bonnet and rookie Rodney Orr lost their lives in Daytona practice sessions. Drivers began openly criticizing plate racing as feeling like a high-speed game of Russian roulette rather than a sport. With cars bunched tightly at 190 miles per hour, winning often meant merely surviving the carnage. Fans thrilled at the spectacle, but many, including stars like Dale Earnhardt, voiced that it was sad and scary to race under such conditions. This dark era of plate racing underscored the inherent tension in NASCAR's business. The breathtaking packs that sold tickets also put drivers' lives on the razor's edge, making every Talladega or Daytona race a roll of the dice. 1994. Tragedy at Daytona. Neil Bonnet and Rodney Orr lose their lives. Speed Week's 1994 at Daytona quickly turned tragic as two drivers lost their lives in separate crashes just days apart. The first was Neil Bonnet, a 47-year-old fan favorite and proud member of the famed Alabama gang. Bonnet had come out of retirement to take one more shot at the Daytona 500 during the first day of practice, February 11th. His bright yellow number 51 Chevy either blew a tire or lost grip in turn 4. The car spun abruptly and rocketed up the banking, slamming nearly head-on into the wall at more than 190 miles per hour. The G-forces were enormous, and Bonnet likely died instantly from massive head injuries. The shock was overwhelming. Just the night before, he had been laughing in the broadcast booth with friends. Now, he was gone, leaving behind his wife and 2 children. On the day of his funeral, many drivers left Daytona to attend, unaware they'd soon be mourning again. Only 3 days later, on February 14th, 31-year-old rookie Rodney Orr took to the track for a solo practice. Hoping to make his first Cup start, Orr's black number 37 Ford roared through turn 2 at about 170 miles per hour when it suddenly snapped loose. As he tried to correct the slide, the car caught air and flipped violently, crashing roof first into the outside wall. The roll cage crushed near the windshield. Orr sustained fatal head and neck injuries. Tragically, the accident unfolded as many teams were preparing to attend Bonnet's funeral. In just 4 days, Daytona had claimed 2 lives, the Cup Series' first fatalities in over 2 years, leaving NASCAR stunned and searching for answers. 1995. Russell Phillips sportsman crash, Charlotte. A lower division NASCAR event at Charlotte Motor Speedway turned horrific on October 6, 1995, when 26-year-old sportsman driver Russell Phillips was killed in one of the most gruesome crashes in the sport's history. After a multi-car tangle in turn 4, Phillips's car went airborne and slammed roof first into the catch fence support posts. The impact sheared the roof and roll cage completely off, and Phillips was decapitated as the car came to rest as a mangled shell. Stunned spectators fell silent as rescue crews collected debris and remains scattered along the track. Phillips's death, the 9th racing fatality in Charlotte and the 3rd in the sportsman division, shocked officials into action. The incident raised serious questions about car structural integrity and driver safety beyond the Cup level. By the end of 1995, Charlotte Motor Speedway president Humpy Wheeler scrapped the Sportsman Series entirely, replacing it with more robust ARCA cars for 1996. Phillips's crash stands as a ghastly lesson, one that transformed safety protocols for NASCAR's feeder divisions. 2000. Tragedies at New Hampshire. Adam Petty and Kenny Irwin Jr. killed. The year 2000 became one of NASCAR's darkest, as 2 young drivers were killed in eerily similar accidents at the same track just weeks apart. The first was Adam Petty, a 19-year-old 4th-generation racer from the legendary Petty family. In May, Adam was practicing his Busch Series car at Loudon when disaster struck. Entering turn 3, his throttle hung wide open, Unable to slow, his car slammed head-on into the concrete wall at roughly 130 miles per hour. The force caused a basilar skull fracture, a devastating head injury, and Petty died instantly. The NASCAR community was crushed. Adam was bright, likable, and carried the weight of his family's dynasty with grace. Now, in a single moment, the dream of seeing him extend the Petty legacy was gone. His grandfather, Richard Petty, was among the first on the scene, standing helpless as paramedics tried to save his mortally injured grandson. Less than 2 months later, tragedy struck again. On July 7th, Kenny Irwin Jr., a 30-year-old Cup Series driver, was practicing at Loudon when history seemed to repeat itself. Entering Turn 3, Irwin's car failed to decelerate, likely another stuck throttle. It hit the wall nearly head-on. The car flipped violently onto its roof. By the time crews reached him, Irwin had also suffered a fatal basilar skull fracture. The similarities were chilling. Same track, same corner, same type of crash, same outcome. On the same day of the week, exactly 8 weeks apart. NASCAR officials and teams were left shaken, facing urgent questions about safety. Loudon's flat turns offered no escape if a throttle jammed, and drivers had no system to shut down the engine in such emergencies. Tony Roper, 2000. For Tony Roper, a 35-year-old NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series driver, the 2000 season turned tragic on October 13, 2000, when a racing accident claimed his life. During a nighttime Truck Series race at Texas Motor Speedway, Roper's number 26 Ford collided with another truck and slammed head-on into the wall at high speed. His pickup erupted in flames. Rescuers had to cut its roof off to free him, but a severe neck injury left Roper with no brain activity. He died hours later on October 14th, becoming the third NASCAR driver fatality of 2000. Roper's death, the first ever at the Texas track, shook the motorsports community. "We are all shaken by the death of Tony Roper," the Speedway's director said, as NASCAR officials extended condolences to his family. Coming just months after the losses of Adam Petty and Kenny Irwin Jr. that same year, Roper's fatal crash underscored the dangerous realities of racing and added urgency to NASCAR's safety improvements in the early 2000s. 2000, Charlotte pedestrian bridge collapses, injuring 107 fans. What should have been a festive night at the NASCAR All-Star race turned into a scene of horror when a packed pedestrian bridge collapsed beneath departing fans. Shortly after the conclusion of the Winston, a Saturday night showcase, thousands of spectators poured out of Lowe's Motor Speedway towards the distant parking lots. Around 11:15 p.m., as a heavy crowd crossed a 320-foot-long concrete and steel walkway over Highway 29, 2 sharp cracks rang out above the traffic. In an instant, an 80-foot central section of the bridge gave way, dropping dozens of people 17 feet onto the asphalt below. It happened so quickly that many victims had no chance to react. Those on the bridge felt the floor vanish beneath them. Those below heard a deafening crash, followed by anguished screams. Miraculously, no one was killed, but the human toll was staggering. A total of 107 fans were injured in the fall. Many suffered broken bones, concussions, and crushed ankles. 16 were listed in critical condition, with spinal or internal injuries. The aftermath was chaotic. Twisted steel cables and shattered concrete littered the highway, while shoes, clothing, and personal items lay among pools of blood. In the chaos that followed, bystanders and off-duty medical workers rushed in to help. One man cradled a stranger's head to keep her neck stable, while others used jackets and belts to improvise stretchers until ambulances arrived. Fortunately, with medics already on site for the race, treatment began within minutes. Hospitals across Charlotte were soon overwhelmed by fans still in NASCAR attire, now patients in emergency rooms. Visibly shaken, Speedway President H.A. Humpy Wheeler rushed to the site, calling it the worst disaster in the track's history. "This is the last thing you'd ever expect. Spectators getting hurt after the race," he lamented. 2001. The death of Dale Earnhardt, NASCAR's darkest day. On a warm Sunday in February, NASCAR lost its greatest legend in an accident that nearly stopped the sport in its tracks. Dale Earnhardt Sr., the fearless 7-time champion known as the Intimidator, was fighting in the final laps of the 2001 Daytona 500. In a cruel twist, Earnhardt wasn't chasing the victory. He was blocking to protect the leads of his son Dale Jr. and his friend Michael Waltrip. On the final turn, Earnhardt's black No. 3 Chevrolet brushed Sterling Marlin's Dodge, breaking loose. In a split second, the car snapped right and slammed head-on into the concrete wall at roughly 160 miles per hour, then was struck again by Ken Schrader. To TV viewers, it looked like a routine crash, far less violent than others that day. But inside the cockpit, the forces were lethal. Earnhardt's open-face helmet and the absence of a head and neck restraint meant his head whipped violently forward. Safety crews rushed to the scene, but Schrader's frantic signals told the truth. He saw immediately it was really bad. Earnhardt was unresponsive, and the doctors at Halifax Medical Center soon confirmed the unthinkable. NASCAR's biggest star had died from a basilar skull fracture, the same injury that had recently claimed Adam Petty, Kenny Irwin Jr., and others. That evening, NASCAR President Mike Helton announced with a trembling voice, "We've lost Dale Earnhardt." Shock and disbelief gripped the nation. Earnhardt wasn't just a driver, he was the face of stock car racing, a folk hero in black. The mourning was immense. Fans piled flowers, notes, and No. 3 hats at Daytona's gates. Rival crews wept openly in the garage. For millions, it felt as if NASCAR's very heart had been torn away. 2001 to 2002. The basilar skull fracture crisis. The early 2000s were one of the darkest periods for NASCAR safety, marked by a devastating cluster of driver fatalities from basilar skull fractures. In 2000, rising stars Adam Petty and Kenny Irwin Jr. were killed in separate crashes just weeks apart at the same track, both suffering the telltale skull base injury. That October, Truck Series driver Tony Roper also died from a similar wreck. Then, on February 18, 2001, the unthinkable happened. Dale Earnhardt Sr., the sports icon, lost his life in a last-lap Daytona 500 crash, again due to a basilar skull fracture. Yet even after Earnhardt's death, tragedy struck once more in October 2001, when ARCA Busch Series driver Blaze Alexander was killed in a Charlotte race crash, the result of the same injury. This string of fatalities finally forced NASCAR's hand. Within weeks, officials mandated the use of head and neck restraint devices in its top series. What had been unimaginable, 4 young drivers and a legend gone in 18 months, became the catalyst for sweeping safety reforms to prevent further skull fracture deaths. 2004. Hendrick Motorsports plane crash decimates a racing family. A heavy fog blanketed Martinsville Speedway on the morning of October 24, 2004, setting an eerie backdrop for one of NASCAR's darkest off-track tragedies. A Beechcraft King Air 200, carrying members of Hendrick Motorsports, was attempting to land at a nearby airport for that day's Cup race. Communication was lost, and soon the worst was confirmed. The plane had slammed into a mountainside 7 miles short of the runway. All 10 people aboard were killed instantly. The passenger list was heartbreaking. Among the dead was Ricky Hendrick, the 24-year-old son of team owner Rick Hendrick. Rick's brother, John Hendrick, the team president, and John's twin daughters, Kimberly and Jennifer, were also on board. Longtime HMS engine director Randy Dorton, team general manager Jeff Turner, and 2 trusted Hendrick pilots perished as well. In one fiery instant, Rick Hendrick, the sport's most successful team owner of the era, lost his son, his brother, nieces, and several key members of his racing family. News reached the track during the race, but officials withheld it until the finish to prevent chaos. When Jimmy Johnson, who had just won, and Jeff Gordon were pulled aside afterwards, the celebration quickly turned to devastation. Crewmen fell to their knees in grief. Rick Hendrick, homesick that weekend, was shattered when NASCAR President Mike Helton broke the news by phone. The days that followed brought an outpouring of sorrow. Thousands filled a Charlotte memorial service, while Hendrick's headquarters became a shrine of flowers and condolences. Investigators later ruled the cause as pilot error, failing to execute an instrument landing in heavy cloud cover. 2007. Fuelgate cheating scandal tarnishes the Daytona 500. The week of the 2007 Daytona 500 produced one of NASCAR's boldest cheating scandals, casting a dark shadow over the sport's biggest race. At the center was Michael Waltrip Racing, a brand-new Toyota-backed team making its debut. During pre-race inspection, officials noticed an unusual substance inside the intake manifold of Waltrip's number 55 car. Lab tests confirmed the stunning truth. The engine contained a fuel additive with rocket fuel-like properties, an oxygenate designed to boost horsepower. In NASCAR circles, fuel tampering is the ultimate taboo. As team owner Rick Hendrick bluntly put it, it's like auto racing treason. NASCAR wasted no time lowering the hammer. On February 14th, they handed down an unprecedented penalty. Crew chief David Hyder and team director Bobby Kennedy were suspended indefinitely and physically escorted out of the garage. Waltrip himself was docked 100 driver points before the season had even started. Though he was permitted to continue qualifying with a hastily prepared backup car and an interim crew chief, the scandal dominated headlines and embarrassed Toyota's highly publicized NASCAR debut. Waltrip, fighting tears in a press conference, admitted he was ashamed and revealed even his 9-year-old daughter asked why he cheated. He insisted he had no knowledge of the additive, but as team owner, vowed to bear full responsibility. Privately, he even considered withdrawing from the race altogether. Toyota executives, furious over the black eye to their image, pressured him to press on and prove himself on the track. MWR's two other cars, driven by Dale Jarrett and David Rudiman, cleared inspection without incident, but the damage was done. Toyota's first Daytona 500 weekend had been marred by a scandal that would haunt Waltrip's reputation for years. 2008 Brickyard 400 tire fiasco. The 2008 Brickyard 400 at Indianapolis became infamous as the competition caution 400, after a tire disaster turned the crown jewel race into a farce. Goodyear's tires were wearing out so rapidly on the abrasive Indy surface, exacerbated by NASCAR's new Car of Tomorrow design, that officials were forced to throw caution flags every 10 to 12 laps to prevent dangerous blowouts. The longest green flag run of the day lasted only 12 laps. Fans and drivers were outraged as the constant slowdowns shattered the event's prestige. Four-time winner Jeff Gordon called it embarrassing. At the Brickyard, such a big race. Jimmy Johnson may have won the race, but the real headline was NASCAR and Goodyear's public relations nightmare. In the aftermath, top officials issued apologies and fundamentally rethought their testing program. They vowed never to repeat that mistake, increasing tire tests at Indy and revising the car's downforce to ensure that such a high-profile failure would not happen again. 2009 Jeremy Mayfield's drug scandal and downfall. In May 2009, NASCAR was rocked by a public drug scandal that ended the career of veteran driver Jeremy Mayfield. A 5-time Cup Series race winner, Mayfield was randomly tested under NASCAR's newly implemented substance abuse policy. Just before the Richmond race, the bombshell dropped. Mayfield had failed a drug test for a banned substance. It was later leaked that the drug was methamphetamine, a stunning allegation against a longtime competitor. NASCAR immediately suspended him indefinitely under its zero-tolerance rules. Mayfield fiercely denied the claim. He argued the result was a false positive, caused by a mix of prescription Adderall for ADHD and Claritin D for allergies. He submitted a second sample for independent testing, but that too came back positive. Convinced that he had been wronged, Mayfield filed a federal lawsuit against NASCAR and CEO Brian France, alleging defamation and negligence. NASCAR countered with its own lawsuit and doubled down on the test results. The feud grew bitter when Mayfield's estranged stepmother testified that she had witnessed him using meth for years, a statement he dismissed as character assassination. In July of 2009, a judge briefly lifted his suspension, but NASCAR quickly won on appeal, restoring the ban. From there, Mayfield's life spiraled. In 2011, police raided his North Carolina property, reportedly finding meth and stolen goods, including heavy equipment and electronics. He was arrested and faced criminal charges for possession and theft. Sponsors and teams had already walked away, and his credibility collapsed. In 2012, a judge dismissed Mayfield's lawsuit entirely, ruling that NASCAR's competitor agreement required binding arbitration. With no legal path left and his reputation in ruins, Jeremy Mayfield faded from the sport, never to race in NASCAR again. 2009 Talladega fan injury crash. Edwards. NASCAR received a frightening wake-up call about spectator safety at Talladega in April of 2009. On the final lap, Carl Edwards' Ford was clipped while battling for the win, sending it airborne at 190+ miles an hour into the catch fence at the Tri-Oval. The fence did its job, stopping the flying car just short of the grandstands, but debris from the spectacular crash showered the fans. 7 spectators were injured, mostly minor, with 2 treated for fractures, as fence pieces and car parts flew into the crowd. Miraculously, no one was seriously hurt, and Edwards climbed out of his demolished car to symbolically jog across the finish line. Nevertheless, the incident was a stark reminder of the thin line between thrilling entertainment and disaster. It prompted Talladega to reinforce its fencing and led drivers like Edwards to openly criticize the dangers of pack racing at superspeedways, warning that NASCAR will race this way until they kill somebody. 2011 The Kentucky Speedway traffic fiasco. Sometimes a dark NASCAR moment comes down to logistics and a lot of angry fans. Such was the case with the inaugural Cup Series race at Kentucky Speedway in July of 2011, remembered now for an absolute traffic nightmare. The Speedway, hosting its first-ever sold-out Cup event, over 100,000 fans, underestimated the infrastructure needed to get people in and out. Hours before the green flag, traffic on Interstate 71 leading to the track backed up for over 15 miles. Parking lots overflowed and then closed, stranding vehicles on the highway. Many ticket holders were stuck in gridlock for 4, 6, even 8 hours, and thousands never reached the track at all. Even driver Denny Hamlin tweeted from his car, sitting in the jam, as frustration mounted. Fans who did arrive described chaos, no parking, shuttle buses failing, people standing 50 deep in lines for portable toilets after being trapped in cars for so long. It was, as ESPN bluntly put it, not a traffic jam. It was a traffic catastrophe. The debacle was so embarrassing that Kentucky's track owners and state officials issued public apologies and promised major improvements. But for many fans, that night was their first and last NASCAR event. A painful lesson in how off-track mismanagement can cast a dark cloud over a sport's moment to shine. 2012 Daytona 500 jet dryer explosion. The 2012 Daytona 500 produced one of NASCAR's most bizarre and alarming moments when Juan Pablo Montoya's car struck a jet dryer truck under caution, creating a massive fireball on the track. Late into the race, Montoya lost control under yellow and smashed into the track's service vehicle, which was, at the time, full of jet kerosene used to dry the surface. The collision triggered an explosion and blaze that lit up Turn 3 and forced a red flag stoppage lasting over 2 hours. Firefighters doused the inferno, even using laundry detergent to neutralize the fuel, as fans and drivers watched in disbelief. Miraculously, neither Montoya nor the safety worker were seriously hurt, a stroke of luck, given the magnitude of the blast. NASCAR's officials treated the incident as a serious warning. They swiftly implemented new protocols requiring all track safety crews to wear fire protective suits and helmets, and even added a second pace car to shield track vehicles under caution. The surreal jet dryer crash has since gone down in Daytona lore, underscoring that even behind-the-scenes safety operations can become perilous if something goes wrong. 2013 Spingate race-fixing scandal at Richmond rocks NASCAR. The 2013 regular season finale at Richmond delivered one of the most controversial finishes in NASCAR history. An outcome so tainted, it forced the sport to rewrite its rulebook. With laps winding down in the 400-lap race, Ryan Newman was leading and on track to secure the final wildcard spot in the chase for the Sprint Cup. Martin Truex Jr., driving for Michael Waltrip Racing, trailed Newman in points and needed a miracle to sneak into the playoffs. With 7 laps to go, that miracle arrived. Teammate Clint Bowyer suddenly spun by himself in Turn 4, triggering a caution. Suspicion grew when radio chatter revealed coded talk. Boyer mentioned his itchy arm, then said he felt sick just before looping his car in what looked like a deliberate spin. The caution changed everything. Newman lost the lead on pit road, and on the restart, MWR's third driver, Brian Vickers, was mysteriously ordered to pit without reason. The moves gave Truex just enough positions to edge Newman out of the chase by a single point. Fans and media immediately cried foul. Replays and social media lit up with accusations that the spin was staged to manipulate the outcome. NASCAR launched an investigation, and the evidence was damning. Team radios captured clear discussions about helping Truex and directing Vickers to pit. On Monday, NASCAR dropped a hammer never seen before: a $300,000 fine, 50-point penalties for all three MWR drivers, as well as the suspension of general manager Ty Norris, who had issued the orders. The penalty stripped Truex from the chase and restored Newman's spot. But the fallout didn't end there. Additional scrutiny exposed collusion between Penske Racing and Front Row Motorsports, disadvantaging Jeff Gordon. In response, NASCAR made the unprecedented decision to expand the chase, adding Gordon as a 13th entrant. 2013. Dick Trickle. Dick Trickle's final chapter in 2013 was heartbreakingly tragic. A folk hero of American racing, Trickle was a short-track legend who captured more than 1,000 feature wins across the Midwest. Fans and fellow drivers adored him, not just for his skill, but for his friendly nature and quirks, like smoking a cigarette during caution laps. Even in NASCAR's Top Series, where he debuted late, Trickle made his mark by winning Rookie of the Year in 1989 at age 48, no less. He was a man who defied convention and earned respect everywhere he went. Yet, behind the humor and generosity, Trickle quietly lived with unbearable pain. By May of 2013, at 71, he suffered from a relentless pain beneath his left chest, something doctors could never diagnose or relieve. It pushed him to a place of despair few could see. On May 16, 2013, Trickle drove to the cemetery where his granddaughter was buried. There, he calmly placed a haunting 911 call, telling the operator there would soon be a dead body and that it would be him. Moments later, he ended his life with a self-inflicted gunshot. His body found beside his pickup when help arrived. The news devastated the racing world. Man, Dick was a legend. That era of stock car racing really died with him, said Cup champion Matt Kenseth. Mark Martin, whom Trickle mentored, was left brokenhearted. In tragedy, the sport remembered his humor, kindness, and endless passion, ensuring his legacy endures far beyond the sorrow of his final day. 2013. Tyler Walker's police chase and drug test. Former NASCAR driver Timothy Tyler Walker became infamous not for anything he did on track, but for a lawless escapade on the open road. In January of 2013, Walker led police on a wild three-state high-speed chase after officers in Nevada attempted to pull over his BMW. Refusing to stop, Walker sped off and crossed into Arizona and Utah at speeds approaching 150 miles an hour. Police finally halted him with spike strips in Utah, at which point Walker tried to flee on foot before being tackled and arrested. The subsequent search of his car revealed methamphetamine, marijuana, drug paraphernalia, and alcohol, essentially a rolling cocktail of illicit substances. Walker, who had already been suspended by NASCAR for drug violations years prior, faced a slew of charges. He ultimately pleaded guilty and was sentenced to jail time and probation in 2015, with most of his prison term suspended provided he completed rehab. The sight of a former NASCAR driver in a multi-state police chase seemed like something out of a movie, and it became a sensational dark anecdote in the sport's history. Walker's actions permanently banned him from NASCAR and underscored the personal demons, namely substance abuse, that can derail a racing career. 2013. Daytona Xfinity race crash, Larson. In the 2013 season opener for NASCAR's second-tier series, Nationwide, now Xfinity, at Daytona, a terrifying last-lap wreck injured dozens of fans and stunned the sport. As the field charged towards the checkered flag, contact triggered a multi-car melee in the tri-oval. Rookie Kyle Larson's car was launched into the air and violently torn apart by the front stretch catch fence. The entire front half of Larson's car, including the engine and a wheel, sheared off into the spectator area as the remaining chassis came to rest back on the track. Emergency responders treated at least 28 spectators, with 14 fans needing hospital transport, 2 in critical condition with trauma injuries. Incredibly, no fatalities occurred, and Larson walked away uninjured, but the scene was undeniably chilling. The aftermath led Daytona to further strengthen its fencing and renew discussions on keeping fans at a safer remove. Tony Stewart, who won the race, skipped victory lane celebrations, reflecting the sentiment that nothing mattered more than the fans' well-being on that day. 2014. Tony Stewart's tragic clash with Kevin Ward Jr. on dirt track. On a summer night at a small dirt track in upstate New York, NASCAR superstar Tony Stewart was involved in an incident that stunned the entire racing world. Stewart, a 3-time Cup champion with a passion for sprint cars, was competing in a local Empire Super Sprints race on a dimly lit half-mile track. Among his competitors was Kevin Ward Jr., a talented and fiery 20-year-old driver. During the race, Stewart and Ward made contact. Ward's car hit the wall and spun, bringing out a caution. Frustrated, Ward climbed from his car and, dressed in a black fire suit and helmet, began walking onto the track under yellow to confront Stewart. It proved to be a fatal choice. As Stewart's number 14 came around, Ward gestured and stepped closer. Stewart's car suddenly fishtailed, likely trying to avoid him, but the right rear tire struck Ward, dragging him across the clay. Ward was thrown violently and lay motionless. Emergency crews rushed in, but Ward had suffered massive blunt force trauma and was pronounced dead at the scene. The horrifying accident caught on amateur video spread instantly, sparking debate and grief across motorsports. Authorities seized Stewart's car and launched a full investigation. Some speculated Stewart may have buzzed Ward in anger, while others insisted he was avoiding him. The tragedy underscored both the dangers of sprint car racing and the reckless practice of drivers walking onto active tracks. Devastated, Stewart sat out 3 NASCAR races as scrutiny mounted. A month later, a grand jury ruled it a tragic accident, declining to indict him. Investigators also revealed Ward had marijuana in his system at a level that could impair judgment. In 2015, Ward's family filed a wrongful death suit, which was ultimately settled quietly in 2018. 2015. Kurt Busch's suspension over domestic violence allegations. On the eve of the 2015 Daytona 500, NASCAR made an unprecedented move that shook the sport. One of its star drivers, 2004 Cup champion Kurt Busch, nicknamed the Outlaw, was suspended over off-track domestic violence allegations, pushing NASCAR into the national spotlight alongside other sports facing similar scandals. The controversy stemmed from a bitter dispute with his ex-girlfriend, Patricia Driscoll. She alleged that during an argument at Dover in September 2014, Busch grabbed her by the throat and slammed her head against a motorhome wall. Busch adamantly denied the claims, but by early 2015, the matter had reached Delaware Family Court as Driscoll sought a protective order. On February 20th, a Delaware judge ruled that by a preponderance of the evidence, Busch had likely committed an act of domestic abuse. Though this was a civil proceeding, not a criminal conviction, the judge's detailed opinion alarmed NASCAR leadership. Within hours, President Mike Helton announced Busch's indefinite suspension under NASCAR's behavioral conduct policy. It was the first time a driver had been benched for domestic violence allegations. Busch was immediately pulled from his Stewart-Haas racing car just 2 days before the Daytona 500. Shock rippled through the garage. Not since Jeremy Mayfield had a top driver been barred in such a fashion. Busch appealed, but both a NASCAR panel and the final appeals officer upheld the decision, forcing him to miss the sport's crown jewel. Days later, however, prosecutors declined to file criminal charges, citing insufficient evidence. That, combined with Busch's compliance with NASCAR's reinstatement requirements, including evaluations and a treatment plan, led to his return. After missing only 3 races, Busch was reinstated on March 11th. He rejoined the series at Phoenix, earned wins, and even made the chase with a NASCAR waiver. 2015. Kyle Busch's leg-breaking Daytona crash. Not all of NASCAR's darkest moments involve death. Some involve a superstar's brush with serious injury that changes the sport. In February 2015, during an Xfinity Series race at Daytona, Cup champion Kyle Busch was racing hard in the final laps when he was bumped into a spin and hurtled head-on into an unprotected concrete wall at high speed. The impact was brutal. Bush instantly broke his right leg and left foot, sidelining him for months. The image of Bush being stretchered into an ambulance in agony sent shockwaves throughout the NASCAR community. Track president Joey Chitwood III somberly admitted, "We should have had a safer barrier there," and vowed to install energy-absorbing safer walls on every inch of our property after the crash. Indeed, Bush's injury became a watershed moment for safety. Within weeks, Daytona and other tracks began rapidly adding safer barriers to any exposed walls. A year later, Bush miraculously returned to win the 2015 Cup Championship. But his crash stands as a stark reminder that it often takes a near tragedy to spur safety improvements. 2015 Daytona Cup Race Catch Fence Crash. NASCAR's July 2015 Daytona race ended with a horrifying spectacle as Austin Dillon's No. 3 Chevrolet flew into the catch fence at the finish line and disintegrated in midair. In a scene reminiscent of Larson's 2013 crash, Dillon's car was shredded by the impact, the engine torn out, and the chassis left a smoking hulk. Yet the reinforced fence kept the bulk of the wreck on the track. In the stands, 13 fans were evaluated for injuries, 8 had only minor ailments, 4 were treated at the track, and 1 was sent to the hospital in stable condition. Incredibly, Dillon survived with only bruises, climbing from the roll cage while crew members rushed to assist. The crash's violence, Dillon's car ripped in half, the engines laying out there, as a driver Jimmy Johnson described, was a stark reminder of Daytona's ever-present peril. NASCAR again reviewed its safety systems, from car strength to fence height, as the sport collectively breathed a sigh of relief that 2015's nightmare didn't turn fatal. 2018 Rick Crawford's criminal conviction. One of the most disturbing off-track stories in NASCAR history unfolded in 2018, far from any speedway. Rick Crawford, a once-respected veteran of the Truck Series and former race winner, was arrested in an FBI sting for attempting to solicit sex with a minor online. Posing as a father offering his underage daughter, undercover agents caught Crawford arranging a meetup, and he was taken into custody in March of 2018. In August of 2018, a federal jury convicted the 60-year-old Crawford of attempted child enticement. He was later sentenced to 130 months, nearly 11 years, in prison for the offense. The case sent shockwaves through the NASCAR community. Fans and officials struggled to reconcile the affable driver they saw at the track with the heinous nature of the crime. It remains perhaps the darkest personal crime associated with a NASCAR figure. A stark reminder that real-life demons can lurk behind a polished racing image. 2018 NASCAR CEO Brian France's DUI arrest. In August 2018, NASCAR was rocked by an off-track scandal when its chairman and CEO Brian France was arrested for driving while intoxicated and drug possession. Police in Sag Harbor, New York pulled over France's Lexus after he blew a stop sign and found him visibly impaired with a 0.18% blood alcohol level and oxycodone pills in his pocket. The sports leader spent a night in jail, and the news made national headlines, casting a harsh spotlight on NASCAR's top executive. Within hours, France announced an indefinite leave of absence. His duties were assumed by his uncle, Jim France, as fans and critics lambasted the incident as one of NASCAR's ugliest leadership failures. The embarrassment was a public relations nightmare for a family-owned organization built on the France name. Brian France later pleaded guilty to DWI, and his reign as CEO quietly ended. The saga served as a cautionary tale that no one, not even NASCAR's bosses, are above the law, and it prompted the sanctioning body to distance itself from the controversy to restore its image. Post-2019, the era of post-race disqualifications. For decades, a peculiar tradition governed NASCAR inspections. If a winning car was found illegal, officials might levy fines or point penalties, but the victory usually still stood. That all changed in 2019, when NASCAR introduced a bold new policy: fail post-race tech, and you're disqualified. No ifs, ands, or buts. This was a seismic shift in NASCAR culture. The first high-profile instance came in 2019, when Denny Hamlin won an Xfinity race only to be stripped of the win for an infraction. marking the first time in modern NASCAR that a victor lost a trophy due to inspection since the 1960s and 70s. Suddenly, race outcomes were not truly official until cars passed tech. In the Cup Series, this new era climaxed in 2022 at Pocono, when the apparent first and second place finishers, Hamlin and Kyle Busch, were both disqualified for a minor technical violation, handing the win to the third place car. It was the first time a Cup winner had been DQ'd in nearly 50 years. This hardline approach was a dark turn for teams used to pushing envelopes, a public shaming that fundamentally altered the risk-reward calculus of cheating. While controversial, the post-2019 disqualification policy sent a clear message. In today's NASCAR, victory can be taken away in a heartbeat if you don't play by the rules. 2019 to 2020. Manipulated finishes and team orders. After the infamous Spingate affair at Richmond in 2013, when Michael Waltrip's team spun a car on purpose and other teams bargained for positions to rig the playoff field, NASCAR promised harsh measures against race fixing. Still, whispers of team orders and manipulation persisted, and by 2019-2020, new controversies had emerged. In the 2019 regular season finale at Homestead, several small teams, Premium Motorsports, Rick Ware Racing, and Spire Motorsports, were all caught colluding to alter the finishing order. Their backmarker cars abruptly retired with fake mechanical issues to ensure one team's car secured a better points position. NASCAR punished 4 teams with heavy fines, 50-point deductions, and suspensions for manipulating the outcome of a race. Around the same time, questions arose about larger teams coordinating in playoff races and manufacturers issuing team orders at superspeedways. These incidents, essentially race fixing in a sport built on fair competition, cast a dark cloud over NASCAR's integrity. They forced officials to reinforce that such manipulation would not be tolerated, reminding everyone of the fragile trust that underpins sportsmanship on the track. 2020. The Bubba Wallace Noose Incident. Amid the turbulence of 2020, NASCAR was rocked by a controversy that transcended sports. In June of that year, NASCAR's only black full-time Cup driver, Bubba Wallace, had been outspoken in supporting racial equality, successfully lobbying NASCAR to ban the Confederate flag at tracks just weeks earlier. Tensions were high. Then, on race weekend at Talladega, a member of Wallace's team discovered a garage stall pull-down rope tied into the shape of a noose, hanging in their assigned stall. Given the cultural context and NASCAR's history, the implication was horrifying. NASCAR leadership, teams, and drivers rallied around Wallace in solidarity, memorably pushing his number 43 car to the front of pit road in a united stand as an investigation began. The next day, the FBI reported its findings. No hate crime had occurred. The noose rope had been fashioned that way and hanging in that garage since the previous October, long before anyone knew Wallace's team would park there. In other words, it was a terrible coincidence. Wallace was not directly targeted, and the rope was essentially a garage door handle tied in a loop. Nevertheless, the incident exploded into a national news story. Some critics accused NASCAR and Wallace of overreacting or perpetrating a hoax, while others pointed out that, intentional or not, a noose is a noose, a symbol of hate that has no place anywhere. Wallace, for his part, handled the moment with grace under immense scrutiny, saying, "It wasn't directed at me, but somebody tied a noose. It is a noose." The noose controversy was one of NASCAR's darkest off-track moments, not because of physical harm, but because it exposed raw cultural divides. It forced NASCAR to reckon very publicly with its efforts towards inclusivity and the skepticism those efforts faced. In the end, the sport stood firmly with Bubba, but the whole episode remains an infamous reminder of the shadows that NASCAR is still working to leave behind. 2022. Next-gen car safety fiasco, concussions, and fires. NASCAR's newly introduced next-gen car faced intense scrutiny in 2022 after a spate of driver injuries and on-track fires forced mid-cycle safety fixes. In July, former champion Kurt Busch backed into the Pocono wall during qualifying, a routine-looking crash that left him with a severe concussion and ultimately ended his season and his full-time career. Weeks later, Alex Bowman sustained a similar concussion in a crash at Texas and missed 5 races while recovering. Drivers began complaining that the next-gen stiffer chassis didn't crumple enough in wrecks, causing impacts to feel far harder than in the older cars. Meanwhile, several next-gen cars inexplicably burst into flames during races, including a dramatic fire in Kevin Harvick's Ford at Darlington, due to rubber debris igniting in the car's bodywork. Harvick publicly blasted the crappy-ass parts after escaping the blaze, echoing frustration up and down the garage. NASCAR officials deemed the fire issue unacceptable and mobilized all hands on deck to find a solution. By fall, the league mandated tweaks to eliminate spark-inducing chassis edges and added venting to prevent rubber buildup. They also accelerated plans to soften the car's rear clips and bumpers. In 2023, updated next-gen cars were introduced with improved crash absorption to reduce G-forces on drivers. The tumultuous 2022 ultimately prompted NASCAR to listen more to driver concerns and make rapid safety adjustments, a humbling course correction to ensure the next-gen era doesn't repeat the painful lessons of the past. 2020 to 2021, COVID-19 pandemic disruption. The global COVID-19 pandemic brought NASCAR to an unprecedented standstill and introduced a new kind of dark chapter for the sport. In March of 2020, as the virus spread, NASCAR was forced to halt its season after only 4 races, the first extended pause in Cup racing since World War II. Iconic events like Atlanta and Bristol were postponed literally hours before cars were to hit the track. For 2 months, the stock cars sat idle while the world grappled with fear and uncertainty. NASCAR finally returned to action in mid-May 2020 at Darlington Raceway, proudly touting itself as the first major sport in the US to come back during the shutdown. But the comeback came under surreal conditions. Races were held without any fans in attendance, teams reduced to skeletal crew rosters, mandatory masks and health screenings for all personnel, and no practice or qualifying to minimize time at the venue. The sight of grandstands completely empty at places like Bristol and Daytona, tracks that normally roar with tens of thousands of fans, was eerie and demoralizing. NASCAR managed to complete the 2020 season by shuffling its schedule, even running Wednesday races and double-headers, and later allowing a limited number of fans at select events. The 2021 season started with cautious optimism and gradually growing crowds as vaccines rolled out. And yet, the pandemic era saw teams struggling financially, with sponsor cuts, at-track employees losing jobs, and the very atmosphere of NASCAR fundamentally altered. It was a time of strange silence and anxiety around a sport built on noise and excitement. While NASCAR demonstrated resilience in the face of COVID-19, those many races with silent stands and the ever-present threat of the virus remain one of the sport's most somber periods. 2020, Ryan Newman's near-fatal Daytona 500 crash. The 2020 Daytona 500's final lap produced a heart-stopping crash that reminded everyone how perilous racing can be, even in the safety-conscious modern era. Veteran Ryan Newman, vying for the win, was bumped into a spin at 200 miles an hour and hit the wall head-on, then was T-boned at full throttle by another car under his driver's side roof. Newman's Ford flipped and skidded upside down in a shower of sparks and flame, coming to a rest as a crumpled heap, leaking fuel as safety crews rushed in. Fans and drivers held their breath. The accident's eerie echoes of Dale Earnhardt's 2001 fatal crash were unmistakable, as black screens were erected around Newman's car and a hush fell over Daytona. After a tense wait, officials delivered miraculous news. Newman was alive, with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. In fact, he walked out of the hospital just 2 days later. The racing world exhaled in relief. Newman's survival has been hailed as a testament to 2 decades of safety improvements: energy-absorbing car design, Hans head restraints, safer barriers, etc. And his crash became a watershed moment. It underlined that, for all the sport's progress, NASCAR's heroes still put their lives on the line, a reality that hit home for millions watching that day. 2021, James Finch's legal troubles. James Finch, longtime owner of the underdog Phoenix racing team, became proof that NASCAR team owners can court trouble off the track as well. In the late 2010s, Finch, whose team had famously won a wild Talladega race in 2009, was indicted in a federal corruption and fraud case. Prosecutors alleged that Finch's construction firm, based in Florida, was involved in a scheme to bribe local officials and rig contracts related to Hurricane Michael relief funds. In March of 2021, Finch was arrested and charged alongside a city mayor and others, accused of colluding to defraud a city government of millions through inflated invoices and kickbacks. The charges included conspiracy, wire fraud, and embezzlement. The case drug on to trial, tarnishing Finch's name in racing circles as details of Company B, allegedly Finch's firm, and its shady dealings emerged in court filings. Ultimately, after one hung jury, Finch was acquitted by a jury in 2023, but not before his reputation took a massive hit. While not as salacious as other scandals, the image of a NASCAR owner facing federal indictment for white-collar crimes was yet another dark footnote in the sport's history of occasional off-track infamy. Eddie Traconis' assault case, 2021 to 2022. In October of 2021, NASCAR crew chief Eddie Traconis' career took a sharp and ugly turn. At Talladega Superspeedway, he allegedly confronted spotter Clayton Hughes after an Xfinity Series race and, according to witnesses, sucker punched him. The blow reportedly left Hughes with serious injuries that required multiple surgeries. NASCAR acted quickly, suspending Traconis indefinitely. The case didn't fade quietly. Traconis was later arrested and charged with felony second-degree assault. Months passed, with the suspension still hanging over him, but his legal troubles deepened. He was rearrested as the investigation continued. Eventually, the matter went before a grand jury, and in December of 2022, Traconis was convicted of second-degree assault. In a sport where most of the headlines come from the track action, this one stood out for all the wrong reasons. The conviction marked one of the most severe criminal outcomes for a NASCAR crew member in recent memory, and Traconis' once promising career was left in tatters. Cody Ware, alleged domestic abuse, 2023. In April of 2023, NASCAR Cup Series driver Cody Ware, son of team owner Rick Ware, stepped away from the Bristol dirt race, citing a personal matter. Days later, on April 10th, he was arrested in Iredell County, North Carolina, and charged with felony assault by strangulation, inflicting serious injury, and misdemeanor assault on a female. The alleged incident had occurred at a Mooresville residence a week earlier. NASCAR immediately suspended him indefinitely, while Rick Ware Racing placed substitutes in the number 51 car. Warrant documents described severe allegations. Ware was accused of pushing his girlfriend to the floor, slapping her, wrapping his hands around her neck, throwing a phone, and making threats. She reportedly sustained redness on her neck and a broken right hand. Ware denied the claims, and his legal team called them false statements intended to damage his reputation and the team's business. Rick Ware Racing even filed civil suits, alleging millions in lost sponsorships and over $300,000 in costs for replacement drivers. By December, prosecutors dropped all charges against both Ware and his girlfriend, as neither would testify. With no convictions and conflicting accounts, NASCAR reinstated Cody Ware on December 12th, ending an 8-month suspension. 2024. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Kyle Busch All-Star Brawl. The 2024 NASCAR All-Star Race at North Wilkesboro started with fireworks, but not the celebratory kind. On lap 1, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. tried an aggressive three-wide move between Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch. Busch got crowded into the wall, and just one lap later, he made his feelings known, hooking Stenhouse's car and sending it hard into the outside fence. For most drivers, that would be the end of the night. Not for Stenhouse. Instead of heading straight to the garage, he pulled his wrecked car right into Busch's pit stall and waited. With no tunnel at the track, Busch eventually had to walk past him after the race. Words were exchanged, voices rose, and then Stenhouse threw a punch, square on Busch. That single swing lit the fuse. Stenhouse's father jumped in, Busch pushed back, and suddenly there was a full-on garage scuffle with crew members piling in from both sides. Officials swarmed to break it up. The aftermath was just as wild. NASCAR slapped Stenhouse with a record $75,000 fine, suspended his father indefinitely, and benched 2 of his crew for several races. Busch walked away with no penalty, leaving fans and drivers buzzing about one of the most memorable post-race fights in years. 2025. Atlanta multi-car wreck. Our final story plays out under the lights at Atlanta Motor Speedway in June, where NASCAR unveiled its ambitious in-season challenge. A mid-year March Madness-style tournament with 32 drivers bracketed head-to-head for a $1 million prize. Fans filled out brackets, eager for a summer showdown. But in the very first challenge race, chaos stole the spotlight. Just after halfway, as Stage 2 began, disaster struck. On a lap 69 restart, top-seeded Denny Hamlin nudged John Hunter Nemechek on the backstretch, turning him sideways. In seconds, cars ricocheted across the track, and the dreaded Big One erupted. Metal crunched, smoke filled the air, and nearly half of the 40-car field piled in. The wreck brought out a red flag on lap 70, as stunned fans looked on at 18 torn-up machines scattered across the speedway. Among those caught were some of NASCAR's biggest stars: Chase Briscoe, the number 2 seed fresh off a win, William Byron, Kyle Larson, Ross Chastain, Brad Keselowski, and many more found themselves in the wreckage. It wrecked the whole field. Total chaos, Logano said after being slammed from all sides. In one instant, the challenge's top 2 seeds, Hamlin and Briscoe, were gone, along with thousands of busted fan brackets. Only a handful of cars escaped intact. The silver lining, with so many heavyweights eliminated, underdogs suddenly had room to shine. A few Cinderella stories pushed through to the next round in Chicago, keeping their million-dollar hopes alive. The Atlanta Big One of 2025 instantly became NASCAR lore, a vivid reminder that at 190 miles per hour, fortune can flip in a heartbeat. Even a new $1 million challenge was no match for the chaos of pack racing. Check out our other videos here on the NASCAR Explainer. Don't forget to hit like, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you never miss what's coming next.